Hello and thank you ever so much for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Arirang, filling in for Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. US President Donald Trump announces the date and location of his highly anticipated second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. It will be on the 27th and 28th of this month in Vietnam. Meanwhile, Washington's top envoy to Pyongyang, Stephen Biegun, is holding talks in the North Korean capital with his North Korean counterpart, Kim Hyok-chol, to iron out the details of the second summit between their leaders. And a government report shows that 75% of South Korea's ultra-fine dust pollution in January came from external sources. Now, let's start with US President Donald Trump's highly anticipated State of the Union address, in which he laid out details of his second meeting with his North Korean counterpart, Kim Jong-un. Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
In his State of Union address Tuesday night local time, President Trump said the second North Korea-U.S. summit will be held as widely expected in Vietnam at the end of this month.
Much work remains to be done, but my relationship with Kim Jong-un is a good one. Chairman Kim and I will meet again on February 27th and 28th in Vietnam.
Trump will be meeting Chairman Kim for the second time. Their first summit was last June in Singapore, but for several months now, progress on denuclearization seems to have stalled. In his speech, Trump said he would continue working for peace on the Korean Peninsula and touted his accomplishments in America's relationship with the North.
As part of a bold new diplomacy, we continue our historic push for peace on the Korean Peninsula. Our hostages have come home. Nuclear testing has stopped, and there has not been a missile launch in more than 15 months. If I had not been elected President of the United States, we would right now, in my opinion, be in a major war with North Korea.
Though he didn't name a specific city or venue for the next summit, many observers think it'll be either Hanoi or Da Nang. The announcement came as talks were underway in Pyongyang on Wednesday, Korea time, between high-level officials from the U.S. and North Korea to fine-tune the summit agenda. After Trump's speech, South Korea's presidential office of Cheongwade welcomed the announcement of the dates and said it hopes an improving U.S. relationship with Vietnam will help create a new path for the U.S. and North Korea as well. Trump said he will also meet Chinese President Xi Jinping around the end of February to discuss broader issues, including denuclearization and peace on the Korean Peninsula and U.S.-China trade. As for America domestically, in his speech, Trump praised his administration's stewardship of the economy. He called for stronger border security, including a wall to stop drugs and illegal immigration, and he appealed for unity in a divided Congress. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Now, many aspects have been considered for Vietnam's hosting of the second Kim-Trump summit, including the country's historical significance. The Trump administration believes Hanoi's history of being a U.S. adversary, which has transitioned into Washington's close partner, can be a great lesson for the North Korean regime. Kim Yo-sun explains.
The decision to hold the second summit between Pyongyang and Washington in Vietnam is largely due to matters of convenience and security. It took into account the travel time for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, as well as U.S. President Donald Trump's schedule for a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Beyond this, there's also a historical context. Vietnam's history as a U.S. adversary has transitioned into a close partnership after the two countries established diplomatic ties in 1995. This followed Vietnam's Doi Moi program, Hanoi's drive for broad economic liberalization in the 1980s. The Trump administration hopes this can be a good source of inspiration and reflection for the North. Referring to the Vietnamese model, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has also said it could be a miracle if Kim Jong-un follows the road taken by Vietnam. Meanwhile, Pyongyang also considers the Vietnamese model as the most viable option for the regime to carry out economic development while retaining its current structure. That is also why the North's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho has visited Hanoi to learn from the country's economic reforms. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has expressed high hopes that North Korea will dismantle its nuclear weapons program as promised. During an interview with Fox Business on Wednesday, Pompeo said Washington is very hopeful that Kim Jong-un will fulfill his commitments, which he made during the landmark Singapore summit that happened last June. The top U.S. diplomat also explained that tough economic sanctions on the regime have caused it to seek a different course. He added that a better and brighter future awaits the North once it fulfills its commitments towards establishing stability and peace on the Korean peninsula. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun is in Pyongyang to discuss the details of the second North Korea-U.S. summit. He departed from Seoul on Wednesday for working-level negotiations with his North Korean counterpart. And for more on this, we have our Park Hee-jun on the line for us at the Foreign Ministry. Hee-jun, what's the latest?
Right, Adam, it's now day 2 of Biegun's visit to Pyongyang. He's believed to be sitting down with his new North Korean counterpart, Kim Hyok-chol, who is the former ambassador to Spain, to prepare for the upcoming summit. It's unclear whether the negotiations will be wrapped up today or continue on to the third day, because there are a substantial number of issues to discuss. And without a clear set of agreements, it would be difficult to ensure the success of the second Kim-Trump summit. The two sides are aiming to find a common ground between North Korea's demands and the United States' demands. The North has offered to dismantle its plutonium and uranium enrichment facilities that provide materials for nuclear weapons. That includes the permanent shutdown of its Yongbyon nuclear complex, but that's only if the U.S. takes corresponding measures. There is the possibility of setting up a joint liaison office, declaring an end to the Korean War, and providing humanitarian assistance. But Pyongyang has been mostly requiring the removal of economic sanctions. It would be difficult for Washington to remove them right away, but Biegun did say at the Stanford University last week that the U.S. is preparing a special economic package for Pyongyang. Now, they would also have to finalize the exact venue for the Kim-Trump summit. President Trump has only announced that the second summit will be held in Vietnam from February 27th to the 28th. And it's likely that they have yet to decide whether it will be held in the city of Hanoi or Da Nang. And there's also speculation that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may meet Biegun before he departs. It's unclear as of now, but I'll get back to you with that when we hear more.
Okay, Hee-jun, now it's safe to say a lot is at stake for this second summit. Is that why the upcoming summit is longer than the previous one?
Right, the second North Korea-U.S. summit is set to be held for 2 days. Last year at the Singapore summit, Kim and Trump met for a total of less than 5 hours, and that includes their lunch and their stroll. If they hold the meeting for 2 days, the two leaders will have more time to reach an agreement that satisfies each of them, and this time we may even expect a banquet. The schedule reflects the two sides' commitment to reach the kind of deal that the international community has been anticipating. And considering the amount of criticism there has been over the lack of progress in nuclear talks up until now, there really needs to be some concrete results. So there's no doubt that North Korea and the U.S. will go all in with their efforts in the less than 3 weeks that remain until the summit.
Now, for a look at stories making headlines around the globe, and we start with a new report that indicates the world may be experiencing the warmest decade on record. Now, for more on this and other stories from around the world, we turn to our Soo-young, who is covering for me. Thank you. So, Soo-young, it seems the weather is indeed becoming warmer by the day.
That's right, Adam. It may actually turn out to be the warmest 10 years that the planet has experienced since records began in the early 19th century. According to scientists at the UK's Met Office, the level of warming over the past 4 years is said to have been exceptional, both on land and in the ocean. In fact, figures show that 2018 was the 4th hottest year on record, and if temperatures continue to rise according to the forecast for the next 5 years, the decade stretching from 2014 to 2023 will be the hottest in more than 150 years. Now there's even the risk of global temperatures rising as much as 1.57 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. This would undermine the Paris Climate Agreement enforced in 2016, which aims to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. US and Chinese officials are working around the clock to reach a deal that will end the ongoing trade war between the two nations. And that's according to Washington's Trade Secretary Stephen Mnuchin. He said on Wednesday that the two sides are marking a big commitment to reach an agreement before the March 1st deadline set by leaders Donald Trump and Xi Jinping to end their months-long trade spat. The Trade Secretary said there's still a lot of work to do and that any deal should be enforceable. Mnuchin is set to travel to Beijing next week for the third round of talks aimed at settling the dispute, which experts say has had a tangible impact on both economies. European Council President Donald Tusk has sparked controversy after he spoke of a special place in hell for those who promoted Brexit without an idea of how to carry it out. The remark came amid a continental gridlock over the lack of agreement on the UK's departure from the European Union, scheduled for the end of next month. Ahead of UK Prime Minister Theresa May's visit to Brussels, Tusk said on Wednesday that he has abandoned any hope of stopping Brexit and that his priority now is to avoid what he called a fiasco. While a number of EU officials appeared to brush over the remark, his rhetoric angered Brexit-backing politicians in London, who said his comments were arrogant and disgraceful. After the British Parliament voted down May's divorce deal last month, Tusk has said the withdrawal agreement was not open for renegotiation, although he has said a common Brexit solution may be possible. Pope Francis has admitted that members of the Catholic Church have sexually abused nuns, and he says such abuse is still ongoing. This comes amid a string of allegations about rampant sexual abuses by priests after a global organisation for nuns last year denounced the Church's culture of silence and secrecy that covered up such cases. Pope Francis said not everyone has engaged in such acts, but there were some bishops and priests who have. He said the Church is working to resolve the problem. It's thought to be the first time that the Pope has publicly acknowledged the issue.
Well, thank you to our Soo-young for giving us the latest on the world news. Now, looking at stories here in Korea, the floor leaders of South Korea's three main political parties are expected to meet later today to discuss whether to convene a parliamentary session in February. The main opposition Liberty Korea Party launched a boycott of parliament over the appointment of Cho Hae-ju as one of the commissioners of the country's election watchdog without a confirmation hearing. With rival parties far apart on their demands, striking a deal to normalise parliament remains a tough challenge. The main opposition party is demanding a probe into allegations of illegal surveillance by the top office and real estate speculation by a lawmaker of the ruling Democratic Party. However, the ruling party is strongly against the idea, saying the February session must be used to work on improving people's livelihoods. Despite a dip in the number of auto exports, the average price of Korean automobile exports reached a record high last year thanks to the popularity of sports utility vehicles. Data released by the Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association on Thursday shows the average price of the country's cars surpassed the $15,000 mark in 2018, a 1.6% increase from the previous year. The data comes as a rare piece of good news for Korean auto exporters, which have seen outbound shipments wane for 6 straight years leading up to 2018. South Korea has seen a drastic increase in the monthly average levels of ultrafine dust in January compared with data recorded over the previous 3 years. But research also shows 75% of the ultrafine dust air pollution last month came from external sources. Lee Seung-jae has the details.
January was a terrible month for air quality in South Korea. The capital, Seoul, saw its highest average monthly levels of ultrafine dust in over 3 years. According to the National Institute of Environmental Research, the average level of ultra-fine dust particles, those smaller than 2.5 micrometers in diameter, was recorded at 38 micrograms per cubic meter in Seoul last month, the highest level since 2015, when the government began tracking data on the country's ultra-fine dust levels. On Wednesday, the state-run Environment Agency said that external sources accounted for 75% of the nation's ultra-fine dust air pollution in January. External sources from China, Mongolia, North Korea, and Japan were responsible for the drastic rise in dust levels between January 11th and January 15th. Although the agency didn't specify one nation, considering wind direction and the amount of emissions, China is presumed to have the largest impact on South Korea. The Environment Ministry says it plans to hold a working-level consultation on the issue when South Korea, China, and Japan hold a trilateral policy meeting on February 20th. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Despite no new cases of foot and mouth disease over the past week, the government says it will continue its efforts to prevent the spread of the disease. The Agriculture Ministry announced that a sterilisation programme will take place in farms across the country today to prevent any more outbreaks, and authorities will be overseeing that process. Considering the maximum 14-day incubation period, the next 7 days will be crucial in determining whether there will be another outbreak of the disease. The base fare for taxis in Seoul will rise to 3,800 Korean won, or $3.40 from the current 3,000 won, beginning at 4 a.m. on February 16th. According to the city government, the late-night fare from midnight to 4 a.m. will start from approximately $4, while the base fare for deluxe and jumbo taxis will also rise to nearly $6. This is the first increase in fares since October 2013. Seoul City is also mulling over the possibility of raising subway and bus fares. One of the common symptoms that comes after sustaining a burn injury is a tightness of the skin. It stiffens our joints and makes it hard for us to walk. To treat the problem, local hospitals have started to use a new wearable robot that helps patients to walk again. Cho Sung-min has the details.
A rehabilitation session is taking place for a patient who suffered a severe burn. And what differentiates this session from others is that the patient uses a newly developed wearable device designed to help her get back on her feet, literally. The device, developed by a team of researchers at Seoul University, enables patients to strengthen pivotal muscles for walking, such as the quadriceps and hamstrings. The device can also be adjusted to function at various speeds, allowing wearers to customize their rehabilitation sessions according to their capabilities and needs.
The device helps patients to go beyond their limits in regards to movement and ability to bend their legs. It paces up the recovery sessions for patients who are learning to walk again.
According to the developers, the device is specially designed to help out patients with intense burn injuries. Third-degree burns often tightens the skin, severely reducing flexibility and making it difficult to move the joints. The researchers also say the device makes the rehab exercises more convenient and safer for both the patients and physiotherapies.
We know there are far fewer cases reported of patients falling down during their rehab sessions while trying to use walkers, air casts, or other equipment. We also use the device to help patients strengthen their core muscles to boost their balance.
With the medical wearable device market slated to be worth more than $14.3 billion by 2022 in Korea, the developers are aiming to come up with more products and technological developments that can help patients heal faster and get their lives back. Cho Sung-min, Arirang News.
Now, these days in Korea, coffee is served in shops on just about every street and alley. It's a fixture of our mornings, lunchtime and evenings, but that wasn't always the case. It's only been a little over 100 years since the drink was introduced here. Now there's an exhibition at the old Seoul station downtown about the history of Korea's coffee culture. Park Se-young reports.
Historical records show the first coffee in Korea was served to King Gojong in 1895 when he was taking refuge at the Russian legation. He enjoyed having coffee and snacks at Cheonggwangwon Pavilion in Deoksugung Palace. Regular Koreans could first taste coffee from the 1920s at the country's first Western restaurant inside the old Seoul station. And people today have come to that same spot to explore how coffee culture began to spread in Korea. The exhibition Winter Coffee Club reflects on the changing history of coffee culture and how it has affected Korean society. Lee Sang, a modern literature writer who went on to open his own coffee shop or tabang, displayed his knowledge and interest in coffee through his illustrations. After the Korean War, coffee was distributed along with relief items and began to establish its position in the country. Locally made instant coffee mixes took off in Korea in the 1970s, and coffee vending machines and tabang coffee shops became commonplace.
Coffee today is not just food and has more meaning than as a commodity. The exhibition hopes to show how deeply coffee has become a part of our everyday life.
The exhibition of the story of coffee will run until February 21st at Culture Station Seoul 284. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
The South Korean comedy movie Extreme Job has surpassed 10 million views in just the 15th day of its run, becoming the first movie this year to reach that milestone. With this accomplishment, the film became the 23rd film and just the second comedy to hit the figure in South Korea. It's also the third fastest film to hit the 10 million mark and has yet to give up the top spot on the weekend box office chart since it premiered on January 23rd. The movie revolves around a team of anti-drug police who open a fried chicken restaurant to stake out an organized crime ring.
Good morning. The rain and snow in the capital area has all let up, while parts of Gangwon-do province could see up to 10 centimeters of heavy snowfall until noon, with a heavy snow advisory being issued. Meanwhile, many western areas, including Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province, are still dealing with high concentrations of fine and ultra-fine dust, with an advisory in place. We'll have to wait until strong winds to blow away the dust this afternoon, but the rest of the country will have polluted air starting this afternoon. And those of us in central regions will see mid-winter-like conditions striking back again, along with biting winds and much colder temperatures starting this afternoon. It's going to feel a lot colder than what the thermometer actually shows. So daily highs will not rise much, maybe a couple notches higher than the lows. In southern areas, we'll also notice a big drop compared to yesterday. Readings will drop even further tomorrow morning, and it seems like freezing morning lows will stay with us until early next week. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news that we have for you at this hour. Stay tuned to Arirang TV and we'll have our next newscast at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. Until then, goodbye.